So why do you want to roll your fenders? The only reason you're rolling your fenders is for clearancing bigger wheels and tires or wider wheels and tires. If you're just gonna run the stock wheels on the stock offset and maybe go a little bit wider of a tire, you don't need to do this. There's no advantage to doing this at all, because you do run the risk of cracking the paint, especially on an older car like this. That's why heating up the paint and going very gradually is very important. Okay, without doing anything to the car first, the car is completely level on the ground, it's not propped up, or nothing's pushing down it. We're going to check how much clearance we have. Just by checking with our fingers, right now we have a 3-finger gap between the top of the tire to the inside edge. Today we're going to be using Eastwood's Fender Rolling tool. There are other methods of doing this job, but when you can rent the tool for cheap, you guys just head on to Craigslist, type in Fender Roller, and there's probably someone in your area renting out this tool. It's way cheaper. Now, unless you own a wheel shop or some sort of custom shop where you're changing out wheels all the time, I suggest it makes more sense to rent a tool other than to buy it. But I think this is the best way of doing it to protect the paint and to get a nice, proper finished product afterwards. In order to do this job, we chalk the wheels at the front because we can't leave the car in gear or apply the parking brake, and we use jack stands, and we're also supporting the rear of the vehicle with the jack. The reason why we have both sides of the vehicle propped up is because this vehicle is equipped with a limited slip differential, and it's a lot easier to turn the wheels if we have them both up in the air. When placing this tool on, make sure you use the provided washers and then put on your lug nuts and just snug them on. You don't have to torque these down to spec. The cool thing about this tool is it uses the wheel as the fulcrum point, and this is how you pretty much get a perfect roll because you're applying equal pressure as you go along. The trick to using a tool like this is applying heat to the paint so we don't crack the paint as we roll the fender, and also doing it very gradually as well. The tool is fully adjustable. We can adjust height and add pressure. So you can see this knob over here, if you loosen it, we can adjust the height. And then over here, there's another adjustment for angle. Now for the first pass, what most people do is they actually have the fender roller parallel to the fender, but because this is so aggressive on this car, we're going to actually give it a bit of an angle for a first pass to help bend it in first. Now, before we actually start rolling the fender, we're going to check to see how we line up. The nice thing about this being a rental, we can actually see where everyone's been using it, and we're not touching it quite yet, but we're just seeing the path that this tool is going to travel. So we're going to put a very slight little bend in it to get it going, and we're going to keep heating up the paint very slightly as we go along to make sure we don't crack this stuff. Now when you're rolling, have it very lightly on and check again for how much you're going to push in, because some parts might get really tight like here, while here it's loose. You have to be ready to back off the pressure, because if it's not applying that much pressure here and then a lot over here, you might get too aggressive, and if you haven't heated up that part of the paint, you might crack it. So take your time with this tool and slowly add pressure as you make your passes. I readjusted my height because I'm finding that this edge is so aggressive and this metal's pretty tough that I'm trying to push the flat spot more into the actual fender bottom of itself, because I was getting too much of a line in the wheel, and it was more just creating a little bit of a indent in the roller wheel itself. So we're going to come back a bit and just work the metal essentially. Like it is coming back, so we're going to take our time and slowly roll this in, and then we'll put more of an angle on it afterwards. Now that we've continually worked the metal, you can see now I have the wheel pushing up on the lip, because right before the lip was completely straight. Now that we got a bit of an angle on it, we can actually start to get this more perpendicular with the ground. So you can see here's where we've been working. Here's the original fender lip. You see we're making good progress because there's a big indentation, but we're taking our time. It was starting to get really aggressive here, so we have to get back off and readjust the tool again. For this section on the fender, I didn't want to not leave it rolled in, so I'm rolling it in a bit. The problem is, compared to the upper end that you saw, I have to keep making adjustments because it gets actually closer to the wheel. So as I'm going along, I'm watching it, and it's a lot of feel, but I'm watching where it's going to indent, because if you just leave it alone, it's going to indent too far. I actually have to keep backing off of it and slowly rolling it in. So if you're uncomfortable with making adjustments on the fly, don't do this part, or pay someone to do it. If you're willing to try it, just go very slow, and when you feel a lot of resistance, start to back off on the tool so you slowly work the metal in here, and you get a nice gradual curve so it rolls in nicely, because you don't want to have like nothing here then all of a sudden it's just flat again. I'm just doing this purely for looks. When you're finished, you should have a nice even rolled lip, so when you feel in there, it's now smooth. You don't feel that edge anymore that's coming in where you're likely to hit your new wheel and tire combo. Okay, now for our moment of truth, we're going to check our clearance. Now what I did was, after lowering the car, I backed the car up a few times and braked hard and tried to launch the car a little bit hard just to get the rear suspension to settle back down where it was, because if you were to just lower the car and let it sit, it might be sitting higher than it usually does because your suspension hasn't settled where it's used to. So before we had a 3-finger gap and it was tight. Now at 3 fingers I can move my hand up and down, and I can kind of get another finger in there, my little pinky. So we have gotten a significant amount of clearance now on the vehicle. So when we put on the new Vossen rims that we're going to be putting on, we're going up to 19-inch 265 40 series on the rear, and the offset is supposedly we picked the offset that Vossen is recommending, and it makes the wheel pretty flush, so we can remove our H&R wheel spacers and we'll have a nice tight look. To see what else I'm up to, make sure to check out my Facebook and Instagram, AnthonyJ350, and also check out our website at www.gofasthavefun.ca.